Good morning, YouTube. Hi guys, today's project, we're back working on our off-grid system in Goliath. You know, a few weeks back when we were leaving the Laconia rally, we spent that whole day up in the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area, and I told you guys I was going to do some work on this. And I ended up never filming it because I ran into some issues. The goal that day was to install the new solar charge controller, and I'll explain that in a moment, and the Cerbo GX unit that's also offered by Victron, so I can monitor everything from inside Goliath. Well, I got as far as mounting the Cerbo unit and the solar charge controller, and that's really all that I got accomplished. Now you'll see there's still this cord hanging here. This went up to the old monitor for the old charge controller that was in here, which stopped working, which is why we upgraded to the Victron Energy MPPT style charge controller. And with the Cerbo GX, there's a different set of cables, so I left this in place because I tried fishing the new cables through by pulling this cable and tying everything up on the inside and getting it to come through. Unfortunately, the cables that come on the Cerbo GX monitor are only about 6 foot long, and they weren't quite long enough to reach here, so I had to abort that. So I left this here. I have since gone and got a longer HDMI cable. I also need to find a USB cable extension so that I can then run those cables down here and hook to that Cerbo GX box, which is hopefully something we're going to work on in this video. The reason I didn't finish hooking up the charge controller is because the leads that come down from the roof, from the solar panels, I went to go hook them up and get this all done so that the solar can start charging these batteries again, but I ran into a problem with the wires where they were deteriorating as I was working with them. So I decided to scratch that as well until I got some better cabling to do this with. I'll take you inside the trailer and show you exactly what I'm talking about there. Alright guys, so up on the roof, and I hope the wind isn't too much. You can see we've got 4 old style Siemens solar panels. They're wired in a series parallel. That one, both 12 volt panels wired in a series of 24 volt and over to the little combiner box. And then that one and this one wired the same way to here, and then the parallel circuit continued down into our cabinet. So it's really hard to record up here with the wind. Originally I wanted to pull the wires through and run new leads, but the way the wires in the truck, I don't think that's going to happen. So I may use the old refrigerator vent as a new pathway and put a new combiner box right over here. Alright guys, well in case the wind was too bad up there on the roof, what I was trying to explain is that there are 4 solar panels on the roof, and they are wired in a series parallel configuration. So 2 of them, 12 volts each, wired in series to make them 24 volts. The other 2 wired in series make them 24 volts. And then they both travel on separate leads all the way down to our compartment, at which point they were combined in parallel to remain 24 volt. The big problem is this wire. Now, I'll show you this picture right here where I disconnected everything at the combiner box that's on top before I cut this off. And as you can see there, the leads that actually come from the solar panels into the combiner box are actually in really good shape. The leads that go from the combiner box down to our compartment are in absolutely terrible shape. The stuff just crumbles. So I cut this section off to show you, because this is, you know, a whole section completely insulated. This is what's running from the rooftop down through the insulated walls and into that cabinet. And this is what I have to replace, and let me show you why. All right guys, so as you can see here, as I cut this casing off of these wires, the casing itself is definitely pretty hard and stiff, which is to be expected. This stuff's been up there for 25 years or so, maybe even more. See, they started this RV build in 1991. It took them till 98 to finish it. So at the newest, it's 97, 98. Because look at this here. Even inside, this stuff is just crumbling. Look at it. That is the insulation. And it's like the silver conductor, not good copper. And when I was installing that charge controller, I just did not feel comfortable with using this because I was going to have to make connections, and the insulation's just crumbling right off of this stuff. So I deemed it to be garbage. So a couple of weeks ago, while we were at the Iowa 80 truck stop, I found some decent 8-gauge multi-strand wire, 2 different colors. And basically we're going to replace that entire lead that goes from the cabinet all the way up to the roof. Now my hopes was to be able to attach to it and maybe pull the old one out and feed the new ones in. But that lead was put in there during the construction of the coach, and it's most likely tied up to all the framework. And then I know they spray foamed everything there because I've got the pictures of the build. So there's just way too much resistance. There's no way to pull that out of there. So we're gonna have to run new leads, which is why I'm probably going to use the chase that goes above the refrigerator. It's the easiest way to get to the roof without having to drill any holes or anything else. And I'll just put in a new combiner box. It's a little bit closer to that. I've got 20 feet of this. That should be more than enough to get the new leads up there. And if you didn't notice, this particular cable that was up there had 4 conduits in it. You see there's a white wire, a black wire, a red wire, and a green wire. And so that's where the series from each side was still running in series down through this cable. And we're gonna change that. I'm only gonna run 2 8-gauge cables from the compartment up to the roof, where I'm gonna put another combiner box, and then we will make our series parallel connections up there. And we're gonna switch everything to run 48 volt instead of 24 volt in this application. Now originally, those wires come right down in this wall somewhere and into this compartment near the batteries, and then it transferred through the wall into the next compartment and went to the old charge controller. Well, in this application, you see our roof vent is right here, which is right above the wheel. So it's gonna drop straight down inside here behind the refrigerator somewhere. But then the access point to get into this compartment's way over here. So at some point I may have to go through the cabinets and then find the way down into the compartment. Now there's already some holes drilled there. It's just a matter of whether I can fish things through the existing holes, and if I have enough wire to do it that way without having to make a new hole maybe on this side of the cabinet. That's what I'm hoping for. All right guys, so here I've cleared out under the kitchen sink, and you can see where that data cable came through, and those black ones are the new ones that I need to run, but I need extensions for. And I'm hoping if I pull out a couple of screws, I can pull this bottom out, because although those go into that corner, where they go down into the box is more like over here on that side, right in there somewhere, that I can't reach. Well guys, I finally got the floor out. Ooh, you can see there was some ice nesting in here at one point in time. I don't think this is recent. We haven't had a mouse problem in here since we've owned the coach. And you can see that they put these grills up there. That was people before me, so I'm assuming this problem was there beforehand. But anyway, there's all my wires run, so I'm gonna clean all this up and see about fishing my wires through. Well guys, I got most of the mess cleaned up, but as you notice, the wires run all the way across. They don't go in over here where I expected them to. They move into the next cabinet. So I pulled the bottom up in this cabinet, and sure enough, right there, you can now see where they go through the floor. So that's my access point. And then I can just follow those hoses through this wall and over behind the refrigerator. The refrigerator is just on the other side of that. Go all the way up to the roof. All right, guys, it wasn't easy, but I was able to get the wires routed all the way through underneath those cabinets up through the roof. As you can see, got a little, where'd they go? They're up there somewhere. I got a little extra hanging down there, enough to get me to the combiner box that I'm going to put on the roof. Now, luckily my friend Ron came by and gave me a hand. It would have been very, very difficult to do without the extra set of hands to fish everything through. I would have got it done, but it sure was easier having the help. So thank you, Ron, for coming by. And as you can see, I've got plenty of slack on this end. HDMI, USB, and my 8 gauge black and red coming from the combiner box on the roof. Okay guys, so what I decided to use for the combiner box on the roof is just this big junction box here. This is a waterproof box, so it does have a gasket under the lid, and I used a watertight connector there. This is where the lines going out to the solar charge controller are going to go, and then I'm going to have to drill a couple more holes in this for the PV inputs. I just don't know exactly where I want them until I get this up on the roof and hang out. But what I did is I went ahead and prepped a lot of the stuff on the inside of this box ahead of time. So see, I mounted little bus bars on the inside, and I even drilled 2 holes down here in the bottom. Now that will be the downside of the box, the way it's going to sit up on the roof of Goliath on an angle. That way, if any moisture does get in this box, it'll have a place to drain rather than just building up into the box. Hi guys, so I'm up here on the roof of Goliath. This is the driver's side of the truck, and here is the vent where the refrigerator vented. And this combiner box is going to go somewhere in this area right here. So those leaves will just have a short jump coming out and into there. So I'm going to run the positive and the negative from the junction box down to the charge controller through this conduit up here. That way it's protected from the sun. It's also protected from small tree branches and so on and so forth. And I think that's kind of the nicest, cleanest way to do it up here. But before I mount this box, I need to route the wires from the solar panels over this way because I'm limited on their length on some of those. So I want to make sure I don't put this in a spot where my leads just don't reach. So got to do a little bit of tucking and pulling and rerouting, and then we'll get down to mounting all this up. Hi guys, so I've rerouted my wires over here, and you can see one is considerably shorter than the other. There's the leads going down to the charge controller. So I think I'm going to put our combiner box right in this area here. So it's close to that, it's close to these, but I'm still going to have to extend the leads on this a little bit. This one here, I think there's plenty to reach into the box. Yeah, so I put the box here. There's plenty of lead here to reach into the box, and I'll strip some of that back, but those are definitely going to have to be extended a little bit. So I brought up the sealants and all the parts and pieces I need to do so. But first I'm going to go ahead and get the box mounted where I want it and sealed to the roof. Hi guys, you can see I've got the combiner box mounted. I've got the leads from these 2 panels run in. There's the lead from the other one, so I'm going to have to extend. For right now, I'm just going to use what I cut off of these to extend those into the box. As you can see, they don't need to come very far. But I've already routed this up and down into the refrigerator vent. So once that cap goes back on, that'll be nice and clean, and all this is protected from all these sharp metal edges as well as UV rays. All right guys, and before I cut these short to make the connection, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here, because I'm using a screw down type bus bar and connections inside this combiner box. I didn't want to just use the stranded end of the wire to crimp down, so I'm using those crimp sleeves like I used in the previous video when fixing the multi-plus on the redo. I'm using those crimp sleeves, and you see how I'm doing it. A double crimp on it, and we get a good cold weld. And before all of you know-it-all keyboard cowboys tell me that I'm not using the right crimps, I should be using ferrules, get off your high horse. If you look up ferrules, you look up crimps. Depending on which way you look at it, they end up being the same thing. Yes, these are non-insulated, so they don't come down over the sheathing, but in my application, I don't need that. As you can see, I've got a good cold weld in there, crimped properly. These will do every bit as good in a screw down type application. Now, I will agree with some of you that on the push in type applications in a square receptacle, the true ferrules probably work better because it will actually crimp it to a square end rather than a rounded end like this. But in this application, this is going to work fine. I really want to try to be a little bit more descriptive on how I'm doing this crimp. As you can see, I have stripped back the wire, the length of the ferrule that I'm using. And the nice thing about this is it's going to stop the squish out of the strands when I go to tighten it. So I'm going to slide it on. I'm going to do a double crimp. I crimp once with one part of the crimper, which gives it kind of a U formation. And then I crimp it a second time, which closes that U and flattens everything out really nice. So let me try to see if I can do this with one hand and show you. All right, guys, so I've got the camera set up in a manner that I'm hoping you can see good. Just giving it a light twist with my fingers just to make sure that there's no loose strands. Sliding the ferrule over top, and you see, I don't have a whole lot sticking out. I'm using these cobalt crimpers. I want you to notice how wide they are. So first I'm using the big U with the dimple. And I know this isn't a hydraulic crimp, but I squeeze it very, very hard, and I've been working out. And you'll see when that is done. All right, guys, now that crimp is finished, you can see it gives it kind of a U shape to the crimp. So now what I'm going to do is come back again with these flat spots, and I'm crimping that U down more into a V and squeezing the crap out of it. That gives you a nice ferruled end, all closed up, and it works good with these screw down type connections. All right, guys, so as you can see, now the leads down to the charge controller are all in and secure with the crimped down and bolted terminals. Now I'm going to take the remainder of what I cut off of that and extend these leads from the second set of solar panels. All right, guys, well, that is it for the installation up here. I have not connected the actual solar panels to the bus bars yet. The reason I'm holding off on that is because I still have connections to make down in the compartment where the inverter and the charge controller and everything is. So I don't want any voltage going down there when that happens. Today we're kind of working in the shade, so there's not a lot of voltage going through here. Plus I've been very careful to only use one wire at a time and keep the ends taped off so that they can't accidentally arc against anything. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and put the box back on the top of this, and we're going to seal it up for the moment. And then when we're done downstairs, we'll just come back up and make those last couple of connections. All right, guys, so we're back down here in our electronics compartment, and we're going to be wiring a disconnect in from the PV array up top. I'm actually using this Square D double breaker. It's not what's typically used in an off-grid solar type system. Usually it's like a plastic box, but this is going to do the same thing. It's going to offer circuit protection, but it's also mainly just a disconnect so that when I'm servicing the system, I can shut these breakers off and it will stop the flow of voltage from the solar array down into the solar charge controller. So I think we're going to mount that right up here in this area, probably pretty close to the top. See, I put another one of the fittings on here like this so that we can use the same plastic conduit that we used up on the roof to protect the wires. As you can see, they're dangling here and they go up through the ceiling of this compartment. So I want to make sure that all that is protected, especially where they come through the hole up here. I had to remove the gas line because it went into this regulator valve up here. And at this point, we're not running any propane devices, so I don't really need it. And I don't know that I'm going to in the future. I just don't want to remove the whole system just yet. So that line's at least disconnected, and I'll kind of just route it out of the way for now. All right, guys, as you can see, I've got the disconnect box mounted, and the conduit is run and cut the length. Now I just got to fish the wires through it. All right, now with the wires fed through, I'm going to leave a little bit of slack in these and cut them. I'm going to strip and crimp the ferrules on the ends, and then I can connect them to the inlet lugs at the top. And then we will route the wires from the bottom down and over to the charge controller, and we will also ferrule those at both ends. All right, guys, I want you to see that once I did the ferrule ends on here and inserted, how nice and clean that ends up looking inside there. Keep in mind, these breakers are designed for solid core wire.
So having the ferruled ends makes it a lot cleaner and easier, so it's not squishing out all the finer strands from this multi-strand wire. Okay guys, got the PV lines connected to the charge controller, secured to the wall and up to the disconnect box. I still have everything closed. Right here, we're actually open, technically open circuit. They are not connected. So now I can go up top to our combiner box again, and I can make all the rest of the connections up there, knowing that I don't have to do any more connections down here. And if I do, I've got the disconnect. All right guys, if you remember, I had two 12-volt panels wired in series coming in on this lead, two 12-volt panels coming in on this lead wired in series, making a total of 24 volts wired in a series parallel. But what I've decided to do to increase the efficiency of this system is wire all 4 solar panels into a complete series configuration. So I took the positive from the first string, ran into the negative on the second string, then the positive out to the positive bus bar, the negative on the first one to the negative bus bar. So now it should be a true 48 volt system. Now I can go downstairs to our disconnect and I can check the open circuit voltage right there at the inlet of that breaker box and make sure that I did it right. Well guys, we're gonna have to scratch that idea for the moment because my digital multimeter has decided to take a crap on me. It doesn't want to power up. I changed the battery, still doesn't want to power up. So I'm thinking maybe one of the internal fuses has gone bad in it and I don't have a spare fuse here. So I can't test that open circuit voltage for now, but I can just leave everything off. I'm gonna finish wiring the battery connections. I've got some 2-watt cable here. Gonna get that all wired up, and then I'll probably run out and see if I can't find a fuse, or worst case scenario, buy a new multimeter. All right guys, I got the battery cables run. Positives coming in through a breaker switch, and then up to the bus bar. The negative is just going straight to the bus bar. I couldn't find any red cable locally, so I just wrapped the ends with red electrical tape so that I know that it's the positive. Now the instructions say to go ahead and activate power from the battery and ground to the charge controller first, and then get everything set up before you introduce the PV array. So I think we're going to go ahead and flip the switch, and I'll turn on the app and see if everything's working. Well guys, this video was taking way longer to produce than I had ever intended. So the last clip that you saw there, we were still in Rapid City. It was just before the Sturgis rally. And there was about 6 more minutes of footage, and it has all since disappeared. So we actually started this project in June on our way home from the Laconia motorcycle rally, as I stated earlier in the video. But I didn't do a lot of recording there. And then of course this whole project in Rapid City, getting it all up and running. So the remaining of the video, the lost footage, I was trying to actually edit it when we were going back out to Rapid City to get the struggle bus, and I couldn't get the footage to download. And I assumed it was just because the airplane and whatnot. And so I was like, oh, well, I'll do it when I get home. So then when I get home, I go to do it. And apparently the reason I couldn't download it is the footage got lost. I don't know where it is. I don't know what happened to it. I must have accidentally deleted it. So basically from this point on, I did test the open circuit voltage, and we were right around 80 volts. I mean, it would fluctuate 77, 78, up to 81, but right in that 80 volt range, which is what those panels should be. Now I'll throw a picture in right here of what the specifications for those panels should be. Remember, these are really old panels, but they're basically 90-watt Siemens panels from back in the 90s. Now, we've had the system up and running for like 2 months now almost, because I'm sitting here in Ocean City, Maryland, and it is, what, the 13th of September? So it's been a good 6 weeks since that last clip had been recorded, and the whole system has been up and running since then. And all 4 of those panels wired in series at 48 volts. I said the voltage is good, but our actual watt output, the highest I have seen it, it's been around 250, and that's in really good sunlight, nice clear day. So, you know, with the age of those panels, I'm sure that there's definitely some degradation in the production. They are like 25 years old, and I do have every intention of replacing them. but I wanted to get the system up and running. Again, this has been a learning experience for me. This is my very first, off-grid type system that I've ever done. Even though we're doing it in RV, it's still the same basic concept. And as of right now, the system is working flawlessly, other than the output just isn't quite as high as I'd like it to be from the solar array. But with that said, today's technology, the solar panels have advanced a lot, and in that same exact dimension panel, I can get panels that produce about 200 watts each. So at some point, I will replace all 4 of those panels with 200 watt panels, and that will give me 800 maximum watts of solar. It'll definitely be better and do a better job at charging the batteries. Now, batteries are the next issue. So currently there are 4 interstate flooded lead acid golf cart batteries, 6 volt, wired in a series parallel to make one large 12 volt battery. I say large, it's really not that big. And just going off memory here, but when you do the math on it, they're rated for like a 256 amp hours or something like that. But with it being lead acid, you really only get 50% of that. So battery performance is definitely an issue. Now, they're working. We have gone, well, the day that we took the truck to get the exhaust fixed on it, we pulled into the auto repair shop, did not hook up a generator, and it was there from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening with no source of charging because it was inside a building, so the solar wasn't doing anything, and the truck wasn't running. So in that time period, the refrigerator was still running, the clock was still on the microwave, so on and so forth, but no real major draws. And at the end of the day, at 5:30 when we picked the truck up, we were only down to, if I recall correctly, 72% battery life, which is pretty good for what it is. Obviously, a nice set of lithium batteries with a much higher capacity, well, they would have seen a much lower state of charge over that short of a period of time. And that is a project to come. I have ordered lithium batteries. By the time we get home from this event in Ocean City, they should be there, so that project and video will be coming in the very near future. Now, my capacity problem isn't just simply that it's a lead acid battery. At one point, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I had an issue where the way I had the batteries wired, we had the 4 house batteries, and then there's 4 truck batteries. And I had a wire running from one to the other so that when the truck was running going down the road, it was also charging the house batteries. And that worked fine until one of the truck batteries got a dead short in it. And I went up to Goliath one day and tried to start it. The batteries were dead. I looked at the house batteries. They were completely dead. So because they were connected, that dead short drove all 8 batteries down to a 0 state of charge, which is obviously not good for them. Once you do that with lead acid batteries, even one time, you will never get the full capacity back out of them. When that happened, it was a bit of a time-consuming process to try to restore those house batteries. I had to do like a lot of desulfitation. I can't say that right, but you guys know what I mean, process. And I eventually got them all up and running. But I know that one battery is weaker than the other 3. And well, a battery bank is only as good as your weakest battery. So I know that these batteries are not performing as well as they should be. But like I said, that'll get fixed with the new batteries. So also in the footage that was lost was me installing and running the wires for the Cerbo GX. So, and actually I think you got some of the running of the wires in there. I did have to fish through the longer USB and the longer HDMI, and I got it mounted inside up above the fridge. And once I went through all the steps to set it all up, it's all working perfectly. I can see all the flows from everything, and I really like that system. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how I set it up and how I did it, because there are other videos out there on YouTube already that do a much better job at explaining it by people who understand it far better than I do. So just Google that on YouTube and you'll see that. So once we got home from the Sturgis rally, Goliath got parked, and he sat for almost 3 weeks. And what I did is I left the inverter turned on so it could invert. I turned off the breakers from main loads, like the refrigerator was turned off, water heaters, air conditioning, stuff like that. All those breakers are off. But I left all the other breakers on. That way, if I needed to go inside Goliath, I could just flip a light switch and turn it on. And I wanted to do a test, so I kept monitoring the battery daily as I went up there. And I didn't go up there every day, but on the days that I did go up there. Now, even when we're not in Goliath, there are some small loads that were still happening. You know, we've got a couple of night lights here and there. Even the little doorbell button on the outside, it's got a light in it. The clock on the microwave, stuff like that. So there was, small wattage draws continuously throughout the day. However, even with the not so high performing solar system, it was producing enough to cover that during the day. So at night, it would actually drop down a little bit, but it would always recover the next day. So almost every time I went up there in the morning after the sun had been out, the batteries were at 100%. Well guys, I think I've been talking way too much, and I'm sure that there's stuff I missed because I'm trying to go back by memory and cover all my bases. But if there's anything I didn't mention or any questions you have, just leave a comment below. Remember, I'm learning this. I'm not a professional. This is my first time doing it, and I'm just basing on the research that I've seen and YouTube videos that I've watched from people that know a lot more than I do. So leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching, and until the next time I see you, keep those engines running.